I love big books. I always have. Even as a little kid, I would try and read ahead and read up from my age group. I'm not entirely sure why, but I think it's because to me, a bigger book meant more story, more potential. I liked the idea of getting lost in something for so long. And that's carried on into adulthood, even as I've struggled to find time to read. And it's been such a joy to go back to books that I loved a few years ago and maybe even enjoy them more. I mean, some of my favourite books ever are Perdido Street Station. You know, that's what? 830 pages? And then, oh god. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, absolute fave, 1,000 pages. Lord of the Rings, famously over 1,000 pages. The reason I say this is because I want you to know that I have a different angle to the argument, do we need small books? TLDR, yes, I think we do. But let's go back to the start of the argument. So I was watching a video by Jess Owens. She is so great. I'll link her video below. And she brought up this argument that happened on Twitter, and you know, this is not always a great way to start a story, but that's where it started. An argument on Twitter where librarians are begging publishers for more short books. Now, I think there's two aspects to this. There is, please let us have more short books for children and more short books for adults. Now, I don't really read children's fiction, or what it would be known in America as middle grade. It doesn't really appeal to me. There's not quite enough for me to read, but whatever, it's not made for me, so that's fine. But I didn't realise that these books have gotten bigger and bigger over the years, and apparently librarians are really struggling to fill the gap. And some people, for whatever reason, have just pushed back against this very simple request. One argument is why should we cater to the diminishing attention spans of today's youth, or everyone's on their damn phones and they can't pay attention from whatever. But I have something to say to those people. If you want to get kids into reading, I mean, admittedly, don't have kids, but I've got friends with kids, I've got a friend who's a teacher, and the thing is, they just want them to read, whether that's comics or manga or whatever. In fact, it's actually a growing thing in school libraries to have more and more of a selection of manga, because hey, this is a great way to get kids into reading. The only thing they're struggling is to find things that are age appropriate. Because the thing is, kids are still learning, and kids are at different levels of reading ability. In fact, since COVID, my friend has taken on a whole new role in her teaching. She used to teach for junior school, but now she is positioned in high school level to help bridge the gap for kids that aren't reading well yet. Because sadly, COVID really affected people, really affected kids, because they suddenly got to high school and some of them had the reading age of 6-year-olds. Not kidding. And that's not something to be made fun of. We need to help those kids. And the thing is, to help those kids, you need to provide them those smaller, easier books that still appeals to their age, but acts as a stepping stone onto something more. So in her video, she's got lots of great examples of books sort of from her childhood, very similar to my childhood as well. But I was curious to see what the state of books in the UK are. So here's one that came up really quickly, 416 pages. Another one, 384 pages. So I was like, well, what's the sort of nearest equivalent? What did I read when I was younger? The Witches. And I was like, well, The Witches is 352 pages. However, pages can be really deceptive. So a quick Google, and we can see that The Witches was 35,000 words, which is sort of where you expect a kid's book to be. I couldn't find a word count for this one, but I found like a suggested equivalent. And the word count, yeah, it says it's 300 pages, which is less than The Witches, but that is double the word count. I mean, this is the main page for like children's and teenage fantasy books, and this is something that came up on the top. But we also have a court of thought. What? Really? Really? So that's what I have to say about the kids side of things. So let's go back to the adult half. Let's assume we're always talking about people who have decent reading comprehension. So the thing is, and it's something, I'm not sure if I've mentioned it in a video before, I've definitely written about it before. I don't think people understand that as adults, we can continue to learn how to read. We can get quicker at it, we can get better at it. And I know because I went through this. Years ago, I have spoken about this before in the channel, but years ago, I realized that I wasn't reading anymore. I was either reading in bed occasionally or waiting until I had a holiday, and that really made me sad. But then lockdowns happened, and I put suddenly loads more time into reading because it was the one activity that I could do. And I noticed a shift. I noticed my attention span growing over time as I grew this habit of reading. It was hard at first to get back into the rhythm of things, to sit down for long periods of time and just sit and focus on a book. But that got easier and easier to do. And I even noticed it in the span of one particular book. So last year I read a book about Putin, which was the driest book ever. It's so dry I can't really recommend it to anyone, but I was determined to get through this book. And the thing is, when I started reading it, I could only manage like 20 pages at a time before I felt like I wanted to fall asleep. But by the end of the book, that amount had doubled as my brain started to learn and rewire itself to get better at handling this style of non-fiction, the style of information. And so that's what people are forgetting. You know, I have so many adult friends that I wished I could talk to about reading, but they are so intimidated by the books that they've been given. I have a friend who I've gifted a book that was maybe like a 600-page book. His brother gave him a 700-page book, and he found that intimidating. And I guess if you haven't really read much in your whole adult life, or what you have read is shorter, then that is a big task to take on. You just see the page number and you get scared off. And I think as readers, if we want to bring people into this world, we need to offer more options that lets them easily step into it. And then we come to my final point, the reason why I spoke about all the massive books that I love to read. Because the thing is, I want small books too. Because when you're getting through a huge book, maybe you're reading a Stormlight Archive that is in the 1200 page mark. I got through Stormlight by taking brief breaks to read other things along the way, because my brain, as much as I loved those books, I needed a little break away. I needed some variety. I needed to mix things up again. So it helps to just drop smaller books in there. And we've all felt that, I don't know, post nut clarity. We've all had that come down from a huge, or at least for us fantasy fans, we've had to come down of reading a huge epic fantasy and not knowing what to do with our lives. But the best thing to do that I found is to just jump into something completely different. Don't go from epic to epic. Jump into like smaller, oh god, I've moved them now. Jump into smaller Japanese fiction, or maybe you want a little bit of romance, mix it up. Small books have helped me mix up my reading. They've helped me to discover new styles, new things. Because the thing is, if I pick up an epic that's actually not a huge challenge, I love fantasy, I know that that's what I'll read. But if I pick something up in a whole new genre, it is way more likely that I'm going to get to it if it's a smaller book, because I don't want to waste all of my time on something I'll probably end up hating. Small books are palate cleansers, small books are fun, and they are so satisfying. Because again, when you've spent months sometimes trying to get through an epic series or one book, in the case of Stormlight, when you've been in that position, it is so nice and refreshing to have a book you can finish in like 2 days. Perfect. Also, some books just don't need to be 600 pages. This Piranesi, Suzanne Clarke, I love Jonathan Strange Noral, but Piranesi was the perfect length. If it was any more, it would make it worse. Some books just need to be short, because that's what the story needs. Okay. So that's why I wanted to make this video. We all need small books. Kids especially, but hey, I want them for myself too. I want more Legends and Latte style chill fantasy to mix into my reading. I need a break because I just read Race of Kings and I need a little space before I tackle book 2. Hopefully I've convinced you, and I'm sure a lot of you people probably already agreed with me, but if you have watched this to the end, thank you very much. Join me for more book chatter another time, and I'll see you there. Bye bye.